So it's almost October, and I was thinking about, as part of the next video in the Cavendish to Fairchild comparison, what kind of decks from the two authors I tend to be drawn to this time of year. So if you've been following the channel for a while, and I think many of us feel this way too, this is just a time of year when we're moving into that energy of fall where we kind of work with decks that are maybe heavy hitters or allow us to go more in depth into maybe root causes or root meanings to patterns or themes that tend to repeat in our lives, or wanting to really connect in with our spiritual path at this time as a means of growth and understanding and awareness. So I chose two decks that are ones that I will never not have in my collection and that tend to be pretty serious. And I'm going to talk about how they're serious, how they compare to each other, and how you can connect with them at a deeper level so that if you have these decks, you can, get your money's worth, for lack of a better term on my part. But also so that you can kind of get the most out of working with the two decks. I've worked with these decks for a while now, and I do feel like I can speak to kind of the nuances of each deck. So we're going to be comparing the Isis Oracle by Alana Fairchild with artwork by Jimmy Manton. Many of you know this is like my all-time, forever, eternal favorite Oracle deck. And then we're also going to be comparing that to, and I keep the Faerytale Oracle in her box, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but we're going to be comparing that to the Faerytale Oracle by Lucy Cavendish with artwork by Jasmine Beckett Griffith. Now, you're going to get a lot of meat from each of the guidebooks. The Faerytale Oracle has 175 pages of guidebook goodies. The Isis Oracle has 211 pages of guidebook goodness. I turned to both of these decks for similar reasons, and this is why we're comparing and contrasting them together today. A lot of you guys really seem to enjoy the compare and contrast series, so I'm going to keep doing it, and I may start comparing and contrasting other decks by other authors and artists as time goes on. We'll see. But when I'm looking for no-nonsense truth for myself, with the understanding and awareness that we're probably going to be looking at some things that can feel confronting or needing to get into, like, again, the root system of something. Both of these decks are decks I will turn to for that reason. When I say heavy, I don't mean this in a negative way. I just mean that they're not decks that you're going to turn to when you have 2 minutes and you want to pull a card and know what's going to happen in your day. These are both cards that, both decks that you want to spend time and approach with that reverence of like sacred space. So these are decks that I work with when I'm going to pull out my journal and have a cup of tea if it's in the morning, or maybe I pull out my journal and I have a glass of wine if it's in the evening. They're sessions when I work with these cards. I sit with these cards and I spend time journaling about what comes up for me looking at the imagery, what comes up for me based on the guidebooks, and how it's applying to my story and my journey at this time. So I do encourage you to really take your time with these decks. They're not throwaway or easy or light decks. They're decks that kind of demand you to hang out with them a little bit. And they're also decks that are very clear when it's not time to work with them. So I wouldn't force a draw if you really very clearly feel like it's not time for a draw. Don't force that experience. It won't be enjoyable for you, and it won't be enjoyable for your relationship and connection with the deck. However, when you are prompted to work with either of these decks, you will have a depth of experience that's very worthwhile for your spiritual path. So this is why we're comparing and contrasting these two as opposed to other decks by the authors. So I think I will start by talking about the Isis Oracle. The guidebook is kind of legendary in that, at the time when she put this out, at least from my memory as a reader, there weren't as many decks being produced with really great quality guidebooks that you could sink your teeth into and spend your time with. And this deck definitely gives you, she found the balance with this deck of not too much and most definitely more than enough to be able to walk away from your time with the deck with some real good stuff. So when you open up to a card meaning, you're going to get, synopsis paragraph, then you get discussion around the card and perhaps what's coming up as either a wound or a light-based aspect around the image, around the card itself and the image. And then you'll get an opportunity to do ritual if you would like to do ritual around that working. And then there's an incantation or a prayer offering for each card. So you can actually craft ritual. I mean, you can craft ritual with any card in any deck, but you have an easy jumping off point to craft a ritual experience for yourself around your card imagery. Now we're focusing on the goddess Isis in this deck, and so everything that is addressed in each and every card is really focusing on her myth, her energy, and Alana's channeling of her message for those of us who are drawn to work with her. So you're probably going to enjoy this deck if you're a healer or someone who identifies as following a unique spiritual path that's very personal, that's probably self-led, or at the very least one in which you take responsibility for your path. And she covers she runs the gamut insofar as like what is coming up in the cards. So, you may draw a card and it may be talking about understanding the truth of a situation or your truth versus another person's truth. You may draw a card and it could be about empowerment. You may draw a card and she could be discussing loss and how we handle that, how we step into our authentic voice and balance within ourselves Isis and Osiris and everything on that spectrum. So this is not a deck that's only going to cover positive things, but Alana does consider herself a light worker, I believe, and so you're not gonna walk away from this depressed after a card draw. There's reality, but there's also empowerment within that reality. So that's the Isis Oracle. Just to give you an idea of the artwork, it's some of the most beautiful artwork to be found in an Oracle deck, in my opinion. I feel that Alana captured Isis' energy as I experience her. She is my patroness. She's the goddess that I work with primarily. And I feel that Alana channeled and captured Isis' energy as I experience her for the most part. And so I feel like this is a very authentic deck. It's beautiful and it's powerful. Now, the Faerytale Oracle. But it is, I should go back to the Isis Oracle for a second. It's an intense deck. And so you're moving a lot of energy when you work with that deck. The Faerytale Oracle is one that many of you know, I approach with caution because Lucy does this with some of her decks. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's some magic in several of them where they just will tell me the truth about my life, and even if I don't want to acknowledge it or deal with it. I consider the Faerytale Oracle the relationship deck for me. I've talked about this, and that's not just romance, relationship in every aspect of my life, relationship with friends, with people I consider family, with, yes, romantic partners too, with, my relationship with my son or certain clients, etc. Anytime I need information on a relationship and my part in the relationship as well as the other person's, this deck has never not been right. It's been 100% accurate, and it's really told the truth even when I don't want to hear it. So I would say if you work with this deck and you find you're having a similar experience as me, this isn't an everyday deck for you. And you're working with myths here in the Faerytale Oracle as well. So, this is a deck. I don't do spreads really with either of these two decks. I draw one card at a time and I sit with the wisdom that comes from that card, and I let that kind of percolate, settle in. I let myself digest the information, journal about it. I might journey with the card. I don't work with either of these decks in a frivolous manner. So I draw one card at a time and I listen to whatever that card tells me. So just because I know some of you are going to ask, well, how do you use it for a relationship? I ask about the other person and myself, and I draw one card. I don't draw multiple cards. I don't go off in like a tangent. I let the deck be very, very clear and concise with me insofar as what myth I'm experiencing with that individual at this time. So just so you know, because I know some people are going to ask that. So I will show you when you draw a card from the Faerytale Oracle what you're going to get. So you're going to get a card representation, a quote from the fairy tale itself. Then Lucy's going to talk about the fairy tale, sometimes for a couple pages. Then she will give you a meaning section with keywords. So you see that it says meaning there at the end. I mean, and then there's some more of those meanings. Here's the thing. Lucy kind of tricks you in some of her decks. Liv Vampire Oracle is like this for me as well. She talks about something in the explanation and then the meanings can be completely different. So I would encourage you to read the whole explanation aspect and the meanings. And from there, trust your intuition about what the lesson is for you at this time. Sorry guys, I just need a cup of tea. A sip of tea. So don't rush through reading the meaning section. I know she explains the fairy tale or the myth, and sometimes you might want to like move through that and just get to the card meaning for yourself. But because she talks about things in the meanings and the explanation, and they're different sometimes. So you don't want to miss out on the sweet there, because there's a lot of really empowering information in both the fairy tale explanation and the card meanings. So I would say, again, you want to sit with this. It's a great guidebook. The Isis Oracle has a great guidebook. You want to take full advantage of those. You know, the difference with Oracle decks is we really get an opportunity to do intuitive exploration, yes, but also because the author has been able to create their own structure, we also get a chance to explore shadow work for ourselves, or just not even shadow work, but like a deeper level of spiritual work that can be really inspiring and very helpful for us on our paths. So I'm going to show you some of the imagery from the Faerytale Oracle, and you can see that you get the title and then a keyword. So the Little Mermaid, sacrifice. In the Isis Oracle, we have soul retrieval, deep soul healing with the goddess. So you get card title and a little bit of meaning or understanding from there. I'll show you some of this imagery. I love Jasmine's artwork. I talked about this in the first compare and contrast. So I always enjoy looking at her artwork in a deck, and I think they did a good job with this one. It flows well between her earlier artwork and her newer artwork. And I do feel like most of the time the artwork really does reflect the fairy tale that Lucy's exploring. So, excuse me. Yeah, just some really, really beautiful artwork here. So again, I do one card at a time, and I love this one. I do not rush my experience with them. I would encourage you, like, if for either of these decks, even if it's what do I need to know about myself at this time, like perhaps through this season, what do I need to know about myself from Mabon to Samhain? And then draw one card, keep that card on the altar, journal with that card multiple times, journey with the imagery. You're going to get such a wealth of understanding of yourself and your soul's journey at this time from spending time with either of these two decks. So I would say, you know, that's a way to really get into the deck and get a lot out of the deck itself. I love this image. It's so pretty. These are decks that do require you to pay attention when they want to work with you. It's not like a constant working thing. It's when they're ready and they want to, and when you're ready and able to work with them. So let me just see if there's, I'll show you Cinderella because it's almost Halloween. And we get that pumpkin in there. Thought there was, yeah, I love this image. This is the Sea Maiden. Isn't that beautiful? So that's an idea of what the decks look like. What I would turn to these two for is empowerment and understanding. And both of these decks offer that. If I had to make a choice between the two, everyone knows that I'm going to choose the Isis Oracle because I work with Isis, and Alana just knocked it out of the park with connecting in with the way that I experience that energy personally for me. So it's just a deck that I really can't live without. But I also really can't live without the Faerytale Oracle. It's extremely pointed and powerful, and it does not pull any punches. It's a straight talker. It's not going to let you off the hook. And I freaking love a deck that doesn't let you off the hook. It's just so much about my work as a priestess and a healer, and how I approach my work in working with clients and for myself. Truthfulness, honesty, but love and understanding as well. Neither of these decks are mean or cruel. They're just very, very honest, upfront, and clear. I think they also balance each other out well, and so you may choose to have both of these decks in your collection. And if you do, I think you will get your money's worth from investing in connecting with the author's creations here. If you're someone who likes to work with myth, and who likes to bring myth into your spiritual path, the Faerytale Oracle gives you a multitude of myths to work with. The Isis Oracle goes deep into Isis' personal myth as a goddess, and that is very empowering as well. So you're getting a chance to work with myth if you're a Joseph Campbell person, and you're getting a chance to apply that to yourself, and how do you experience authenticity and empowerment through application of that myth in your own life. And how do you retell your own story? Both of these decks give you an opportunity to do that. I forgot to check the card count on the Isis Oracle, guys, because I've had the Isis Oracle forever and I don't have the box anymore. But Lucy's deck has 44. I believe, let me just check the card count. And I know someone had asked me to compare card spreads in these decks, so I'll do that in a moment, but let me just check. Oh, of course she doesn't have it numbered. I mean, it looks like we have a good amount. I'm not going to guess because I don't want to guess wrong, but there's a fair amount in this deck. I mean, they're similar in size. You know, they're similar in size. So I want to talk for a moment about spreads. I don't really use card spreads, guys. I don't, but I will say that when I do a spread that's involving the Isis Oracle, and I want to understand a situation in my life, I will use the Wing of Isis spread. It's very effective. It's a really great 5-card spread. Very good questions come up in the way she set that spread up. So I would recommend the Wing of Isis from the Isis Oracle. From the Faerytale Oracle, I honestly have not used the spread that Lucy set up here, which is the Happily Ever After spread. I think it's, or she has a Fairy Cross spread and a Moon spread. Lucy's spreads are pretty good though, and I would say, you know, she does encourage you to be honest and compassionate with yourself as you work with the spread. So I would say you may want to give the Happily Ever After spread a try. I think the integrity in each of their guidebook spreads are very much a large part of, the integrity is there in those spreads, let me say it like that. So you're gonna, I would say if you do like to work with spreads, then working with spreads in these guidebooks is definitely going to give you a really nice jumping off point. But again, I don't really work with spreads, so I can't speak to the spreads as much as some readers could. I read freeform, so when I'm actually reading, like reading for clients, etc. For myself, if I'm stuck in a situation, I will use a spread like the Wing of Isis to give myself clarity where I'm not seeing it so that I can understand my blind spots in any given situation. So I will say that. So again, of the two, Isis is my favorite, but I love, love, love both of these decks, and I will not ever not have them in my collection. They're very powerful. They are straight to the point, truthful, upfront. They're not for the faint of heart. If you are just starting to work with tarot and or oracle decks and you are a little bit timid, I wouldn't necessarily start with either of these. I would start with a different deck, and I will do another video on top 5 oracle decks for beginners. Some people have asked me to do that as well, so I'll make sure I do one of those before we move into the winter season. But I wouldn't necessarily start with these if I was a beginner. But you are going to get your money's worth from both of these decks. I have huge love for both of them. So I hope you found this video helpful if you're considering what you want to use either deck for. Like I said, for the Isis Oracle, clarity and empowerment. For the Faerytale Oracle, clarity, especially in relationships for me, and empowerment. Empowerment because there's an honesty that each card calls you to look at within your own self that's creating a situation, whether it's a positive one or one you're viewing as negative. And you're going to get clarity and honesty from both of these decks. As always, I am sending you all much love and many blessings. I will see you in the next video. Take care.